My goodness.
Talk no more, none of that shit. I'm gonna let you say
Let's go, eight.
got me started. Wrist frames carded. Pull up double parking. Don't even pay like I'm the owner. My young niggas retarded.
All right. Yo, what up, guys? We're on the clock. Julian is out for a couple pods, but luckily I have some great guests lined up. And first off, I'm joined by a good friend of the podcast. It's been a couple of years. Ersin Demir. It's good to see your face on the Zoom screen again.
Yeah, man. The same goes for me. And Caleb, thanks for having me on again. I remember I came one of the many first guests of this podcast, which was a big honor to me.
Yeah.
And let's do it, man. New
Yeah,
basketball season around the corner and ready for the ACC.
Yeah, I'm stoked to talk about the ACC. And I mean, before we even get into it, because I mean, there's so much to talk about with this conference, and I've been pumped up to talk about every single conference. And this is definitely one that, deserves its own podcast along with the Big 12 and the SEC. And I couldn't be happier to have you on to talk about it. I talked to Quint, and, obviously Quint's a missing face on the Clock podcast. He comes and goes as he pleases, and we love him. But I mean, every time I talk to Quint and we get to reminiscing about, his appearances on the podcast, he always speaks so highly about the pod that we all did together. And, I couldn't agree more. I think that's one of the better pods on this channel. And there's a reason why it's still up and it's still on there. I took a lot of the early ones down because, in retrospect, just be like, oh, this isn't the best quality work, But that one stood the test of time. I mean, we made some good calls on there. Some of the Harrison Barnes thing is we talked about him a little bit, but a lot of the other guys that we talked about, like Trey Murphy, have all blossomed into good NBA players, and I think we did a great job on that podcast.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you. I love that part, man. I remember we went in so deep, and
yeah, that was the
man,
first
it
little
was
taste.
fun to look back to.
Yeah, that was the first little taste that a lot of us had of advanced analytics, and being able to implement that into podcast work was a big step for me, Julian, and Quinn. And I have to give props to you because I truly, wouldn't be in the spot where I am, especially, we don't have a big following by any means, and the engagement on the pod is what it is. I do this because I love basketball, not for money, not for numbers, not for any of that. But I mean, I have to give you props because you're probably one of my greatest inspirations, at least on the Twitter platform. I mean, there was nobody that pushed me to want to learn how to edit film, because I saw the work you were doing, and I'm like, this is great. This is exactly what I've wanted to do. My whole life is put together film and show people what I see in small segments. And, you were able to take the time and, explain stuff to me over Twitter DMs. And, we have the time difference barrier, and obviously it's been tough to nail podcasts down, but you've always been a great resource. And, we're super thankful, to have you as a friend of the pod. So I have to give you your props on that.
Hey, thanks, man. I know I'm grateful because to me, we talked about it off the pod as well. You have the talent, you have the will to be great. And, if I'm able to help you, that makes me happy as well, but it means a lot to me, man. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And I thank you. So, I mean, well, now that we got all the soft stuff out of the way, we can talk about basketball.
Yeah.
We got a great conference in front of us with the ACC. And I mean, we're going to jump right into the conversation at the top. I don't think I went back and was looking at this conference, at least from a statistical standpoint, and looking across the returners mostly, because that's kind of, where your mind's got to be geared for looking forward. And we both had him listed as our player of the year. He's unanimous first team between the two of us. And I'm sure Julian would feel the same. Unfortunately, he didn't get to fill out the sheet. He's busy with work. I'm busy with school. He's, juggling his stuff. Life happens. And I'm sure you understand, but I'm sure he would concur that Cal Filipowski was quietly one of the best players in all of college basketball and probably didn't get the props that he deserved come draft time. I don't know if you agree with that sentiment or not.
Yeah, 100%, man. If you look at the last season as well, team was surrounded mostly, I think, especially latter stage of the season with around Kyle Filipowski. I mean, the usage was there, and the whole system was built around him, it seemed. And I think if he put his name in the draft, it would be a top 20 pick as well. But I'm not really sure how much is true. but he wanted to stay at Duke, you know. That's what he really wanted.
Yeah.
And he came back to work on himself, to take that bigger role. And I think the table is set for him, man, because Duke took in a lot of freshmen, and they kept Mark Mitchell, kept Proctor. These three guys will be in the main core, but Filipowski is their leader. And I think Duke is by far the best team as well. So it was an easy pick to me as well to go
Yeah.
for Filipowski as the best player.
Let's stick with Duke. I mean, you hit it right on the head. I mean, bringing back Mitchell, Filipowski, and Proctor, and it's very clear that they brought back this core with the intention of winning a national championship. And I think Kyle Filipowski, iterated those sentiments, and I'm sure Mark Mitchell felt the same way because they both could be NBA players right now. Even Tyrese Proctor had a chance to, slip into the late first round, even a second round pick, and I'm sure he would have shown out in the pre-draft process. And like you mentioned, I mean, they brought in a guy. I'll start with Jared McCain, who's just I don't know. I I have to put myself on blast because I always viewed him as a TikTok kid. I was just like, I can't jive with the TikTok stuff. I want him to focus on the court, but damn it, the kid can play.
Yeah.
He is just a hooper. He's really grown in to himself. He displays unreal maturity, and I think that although I can have my feelings about what he does off the court, you can't argue about the body of work that he's put on the court, especially pre-Duke. I mean, people are just raving about this kid. What are your thoughts about Jared McCain?
Yeah, I like him, man. But to be honest, I like that off-court stuff as well because we have to consider them the age they are, you know. They're slowly getting into maturity. Some play mature early, some later. And I think the Duke system is perfectly for these guys, and I think Coach Shire will really get in his head, teach him how to be a pro. I mean, at high school level, it's not realistic to expect that from him. Of course, some players do it ahead, and that gives them an advantage. But he goes to Duke. To be honest, I don't see a one and done player in him. I think for him, it isn't really beneficial to go one and done, unless he's having a great season, of course, where he's shooting 40% from three, getting to spots, via various plays, etc. But now it's really early in the year, and considering how low the Duke is, I don't think it's really realistic that he will get featured a lot to be in the top 20, top 15 considerations. I see him as a long-term prospect, although the hype is a bit too much around his name, but that's a positive because
Yeah,
Duke took a lot of 5 stars in, and he's one of them. I like him, man.
yeah. I mean, the 14th ranked recruit per 24/7 is kind of what I bounce back on just because it's got the most players that they rank. But yeah, super impressed by his game. I like what you said about kind of him as a long-term prospect. I think he really deserves to be a lottery pick or a top 20 pick, like you said, at some point in time. I don't know if it's this draft class. I think there's a lot of guards in this class that maybe have better one and done upside, like you're kind of saying. But if he can shoot the cover off the ball from three, there's no reason why he can't be in conversations,
Yeah.
especially I think he has a great scoring package inside the paint. I think that he handles himself well and he's patient. Is able to create mismatches on, even guards that are bigger than him. He's strong, he's well built for, a 19-year-old, 18-year-old. But like you said, there's veterans on this team like Jeremy Roach that are just gonna get more touches than him. Tyrese Proctor is gonna get more on ball touches. And if he can thrive off ball and in his moments, where he's probably going to run that second unit with guys like Foster and Sean Stewart and, TJ Power, he's going to have an opportunity to really let himself, grow into a really strong role as a combo guard, which I mean, at 6'2", he's definitely got a better frame than he plays bigger than 6'2". I'm sure you would agree with that. So an exciting player. A guy on the Duke roster that you put down as your all freshman team. I had TJ Power. And Sean Stewart, but you had Caleb Foster. And before I dig into Stewart, because I know there's some stuff that Julian said about Stewart that he really likes. Tell me about Caleb Foster and what about his game, kind of stands out to you.
Well, to me, I think if I look at the future as a projected NBA role, I think Caleb Foster has the biggest chances to carve himself a role. Not a big role, but more as a complementary piece. I think at Duke, you always have to sacrifice. It's not realistic to be a star at Duke, especially with how loaded their class is. But regarding to Foster, I think he has that positional size. I think he has the body to, in the future, I think he's not a one and done either, as for now. But I think he is ahead of guys like McCain, guys like Power to really carve himself a solid role where he gets a lot of minutes. Of course, in terms of usage, you're not going to be as much as you would like from these prospects, but you're going to Duke, so you know that at forehand. So regarding Foster, I think he's going to be just like in a complementary piece off ball. He has to cut hard, and he has to make off ball plays. I think I like his frame. I think he's a bit. I think as for now at this stage, okay, he's a bit slim, but if he puts in the work, he's going to be a good prospect in the future. And I think the biggest thing that I want to hit is everyone's so focused about being freshmen to the NBA, going one and done. But for these guys, I think going one and done shouldn't be the goal. Just to benefit from the Duke system, go there for 2 years, just enter the NBA as after his sophomore year or junior. That's not a bad thing, because especially with Coach Shire, he's really investing in these kids, man. Because taking in potential 3 top 40 players with Mark Mitchell, Tyrese Proctor, and Filipowski is not every coach's thing, So I think Duke's goal is to keep continuing in the roster and give the second years to these guys, man, if they earn it. So I like Foster, man. I think in terms of the freshmen in the whole ACC, it's a little bit less in terms of total talent. So that's why I have to go with 2 Duke guys, because I
Yeah,
think Foster is going to be featured.
I hear you, and I went with three. I like Stewart's defense, and I like Power's versatility. Um, I think both of them will probably get limited playing time behind Mitchell and Filipowski. But the thing with Stewart is I think he could really pop as a defensive prospect. Julian, kind of compared him a little bit to Dylan Mitchell with kind of his switchability and the things that he can do movement wise on defense. And I think if there's any, injuries, anything's going on, I think the guy that's going to be stepping into a lot of those front court minutes is going to be Stewart. And I'm excited to see what he's able to do. We were able to see a lot of flashes from Lively last year, being an off ball and just kind of, a rim presence. I expect similar things out of Stewart, and I think that he could have a big year defensively, maybe not in the stat sheet, but on film, I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. Um, and I'll kind of pivot because I think the guy that deserves honestly more time, especially talking about the defensive end, I list him as my defensive player of the year because I think they're so versatile and so valuable to this Duke team to dictate their success. Mark Mitchell is probably one of my favorite prospects in all of college basketball. Maxwell Baumbach, we had on, recording this on, Friday the 13th. I always like to be transparent about dates we're recording. Today, by the way, shout out today, we put up, our first college player interview and film breakdown with John
Yeah,
Lovelace.
that's awesome.
So go check that out. But we had an episode go up this week on the 11th with Maxwell Baumbach talking about the Ignite guys. He mentioned that he just dropped a piece, which would been this Monday of this week of October. I think that's be the 9th on Mark Mitchell. And I love some of the things that he highlighted, not only defensively, but offensively. If you're talking about a guy who's the perfect complementary connector piece, I don't know if you get much better in college basketball than Mark Mitchell. I think he has a phenomenal IQ. And his ability to make quick reads. I mean, I cut up some film last year where I was just astonished at his ability to consistently make plays and make the same plays over and over again. Like he is not overthinking stuff. He is taking what's given to him and he's making quick, easy reads. And last year being a freshman, I only expect him to take another leap as a sophomore. And I think the jumper is going to come around a little bit more. What are you thinking about Mark Mitchell and maybe his from a prospect lens? What do you think of him as, I have him as a top 20 guy going into the preseason, probably. I mean, Julian haven't really find out we'll have a top 300 watch list, a little nugget there. We'll have a top 300 watch list coming soon. I know it's a lot of players, but we've been putting in the work and we're confident that, we're going to talk about 300 guys that should be on your radar going into the season because that's what people deserve. They deserve to know about everybody in the country. But Mark Mitchell is going to be a guy that's right there on the first page of that sheet. What do you think about that?
Yeah, man, I like Mark Mitchell, man. I remember, what Rafael Barlow did last season with the prospect pitch. I had Mark Mitchell, man, going top 20 last year. Of course, at that moment, with the role he had Was it realistic? Not really. But that's what I really was feeling because, as you say, he's the perfect complementary player. And you pay a price like that, you know. But what I like about him most is that he barely had the ball in his hands. He was making quick decisions, losing that ball, keeping the ball moving, you know, especially in high motion offense at the NBA level. Having a guy like him at the 3 or the 4, playing in a complementary role to those high usage stars is going to be his thing, you know. And what I like about him most is that he exploits mid matches very well. He gets to the rim very well, and he finishes with both hands, man. And I think finishing with both hands is really seen as a big quality because you have to do that at the NBA level. But in college basketball, he's doing it at the consistent level. At the high school level, he did it as well. Around about the jumper, I think the jumper is work in progress, and I'm really sure that he worked on it all summer. But he's one of those rare guys that doesn't need to be a volume shooter to be successful at the NBA level. Because what I like about him is what Coach Shire runs a lot of those, off-ball screening plays, screen motions, especially with Tyrese Proctor in the backcourt, exploiting the gap as the defense gives him in the pick and roll. I think at the NBA level, with more spacing, his job will be a lot easier as well because I like him, he's constantly setting screens, he's constantly moving, he's very vocal on the court as well. I think he's not a leader, but he takes that leader role very seriously because he's the perfect guy that you put next to your high usage star, as a 3 or a 4. I think playing as a 4 is going to be his NBA role, not really a 3, because he's not really that scoring threat at this moment.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of see him as a 4 long term and kind of being that perfect modern 4. I think, if his highest upside is probably a guy like Jeremy Grant, I think is the guy that
Yeah.
comes to mind. And you highlighted perfectly. I think he's the perfect guy to play next to a Filipowski and a Proctor. Where Filipowski is going to get a lot of those post touches. And like you said, I think that the play that I was cutting up, it's in our introduction. It's the first clip is him, throwing a lob to Lively in a pass screen action off ball. He's, getting the ball in the high post, looking either the pass to the corner, or you're making the lob pass. And I think he does that phenomenally well. You highlight the mismatches stuff that was, right off my note sheet. I just love his patience, love his game, great IQ. We should probably stop raving about these Duke guys because it's just going to turn into a Duke podcast. But I mean, we both had them. I had them as the team to beat. You had North Carolina. I think North Carolina is going to be our next stop on this conference. We've talked about it a lot on these podcasts, getting, these 5th and 4th year big men back, like the Dickinsons, the Zach Edey's, Armando Bacot, is a guy that, staying around in college is the only reason why I like you having them as the team to beat, to be honest. Because I think when you have a back to the basket player like Bacot who can dominate the glass, get easy baskets when you give him the ball, it's tough to stop. And they're going to be a consistent scoring team. And then when you surround them with guards that can pass the ball and create offense on their own, they look good. And I mean, I expect, good things out of Jalen Washington and Harrison Ingram, but who on this North Carolina the most gets you excited and makes you believe that they're the team to beat in this conference?
Now, to start off, man, I think last season was a nightmare for them in terms of chemistry. Caleb Love left for a big reason, and they brought in Elliot Cadeau. Having RJ Davis at the 2, I think, is going to be crucial for Cadeau. It's a small backcourt, but I like Cadeau as this team's leader, as crazy as it sounds, because it's Baker's team, of course. But Baker is a bit limited in what he can do. And of course, college basketball is a center-minded game, at least how I see it. And he's going to be a double-double threat every night, without doubt. But in the backcourt, I think RJ Davis with his defense is going to make life easier for Elliot Cadeau in his first games, So to get accustomed to the college basketball level. But to be honest, they took in a lot of pieces. I don't really see how they're going to put it together. But two years ago, they were in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
And if you consider that Love is gone, Love was a huge reason why that offense didn't really click last season. I think North Carolina is still a team to beat. I think they have too much quality, man. And they have something to make up, with Duke beating them on their home court, taking them out of the tournament. I think that's why I had them as a team to beat. Not because they're the best, that's Duke by far, but they have a lot to make up, for last season. That's why I had them as the team to beat, man. And I like that team in terms of the experience, but Elias Cadeau is what I focus on mostly in that team. I like Washington, but I have to dig in his film a lot more before I can say more about him.
Yeah, he definitely didn't have a lot, but I mean, bringing in a guy like Okonkwo, from West Virginia is going to strengthen up that front court as well. Even if Washington doesn't take the next step that I think a lot of people hope he can. And a guy that I really like and I think adds really great depth to this team is Seth Trimble. I always have to talk about my Wisconsin guys, because I'm a big believer in Wisconsin high school hoops. But Seth Trimble is a little bit of a wild card for this team that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about or talking about, because he provides something that Cadeau and Davis don't, which is having a dynamic, athletic guard who can get his own shot and kind of be a game breaker on both ends. I love his defense, and I think he's going to come in off the bench, and if his shot's not a thing, which I think it will be, I think he'll be able to shoot like 35% from
Yeah, they
unlimited.
kept him on the bench for too long, man. I thought he would transfer out, but he stayed.
Yeah, I'm happy he stayed because I think he's going to come in. He's going to have a large stage. There's no greater stage than playing in North Carolina college basketball. Just in that state, Duke, North Carolina State even has etched themselves into being, a prominent school to watch on a yearly basis. As much as North Carolina and Duke fans don't want to hear that, but it just is what it is. I love his game. I think he's going to come in. He's going to be that lockdown guard that they need. Late in games, if Proctor's, given this small backcourt headaches, just throw Trimble out there on him. Let's see what the kid can do, picking Proctor up from half court or 3/4 court. And I think he's going to do it willingly. This kid wants to play basketball. He went to North Carolina for a reason. He was a much more highly touted recruit than people are remembering. And he's a player that I still think could be a draft prospect. I don't know. I really want to see a larger role for him. Like you said, he was just sat down for too long. And I think you mentioned it perfectly at the top of this North Carolina team last year. It was just really a head case to kind of wrap your mind around what their rotations were. I just think they were latching on to some of these wings for too long. The Puff Johnsons, the Leaky Blacks. It just wasn't working. They didn't have enough spacing, and now bringing in a guy like Harrison Ingram, who's kind of a do it all wing, reminds me a little bit more of the wings that they've had in the past, like Bryce Johnson and some of these guys that have been able to when they come in and commit and play their role, they can be really beneficial pieces to a team that is built, again, like we were talking about the Duke team. When you have a player like Baycott or like a Filipowski, you're trying to win a championship. That is your only goal. And I think Trimble, Washington, Ingram, Okonkwo, all these guys are going to be huge pieces that dictate whether this team is as successful as you think and as a lot of people want them to be. I think pivoting a little bit towards just kind of the general conversation about the conference. Some of the guys that I mentioned, Mark Mitchell is my most improved player. He definitely has I said him as like the secondary option because I think he has a little bit less, of a jump to make. But I bolded the name for a reason. Guillermo Diaz-Graham is a name that, and his brother Jorge is a name that I'll be talking about coming up here with KJ Pistons soon. Likely this weekend or next. Great player, like exceptional position size, really can do a little bit of everything. What is the aspect of his game that you see him really unlocking next year for Pitt, and even his brother too? They're both very similar, but I think Guillermo is the one that I like a lot as a draft prospect.
Yeah, me too, man. I wrote about Guillermo in the summer on my Substack. I think he's going to be a potential first-round pick next year. If I look at him, it's all there, man. In terms of the biggest trait is the basketball IQ. It's going to be a bit of a long story what I want to tell about him, but what you see with Spanish prospects is one thing. What Spain does very well is, for example, they won the European Championship, right? The national team. They don't have a star because they play in a certain way, all the ways from the U13s to the U19s to the national team. They play one certain way. So what you see is a lot of consistency from a young age. So if you combine it with the fundamentals that these guys are being taught in Europe, and you bring that over to the United States and you see that translating in his first year, he didn't have a big role. Burn didn't either, but that's his first year, you know. And to coming back to his game, I think he's going to be a modern stretch five, who is not going to be able to play as a four because physically he's not really strong enough to play as a four. But what I like about him is his screening. He's one of the best screeners in college basketball by far. Because what you see, and does not this isn't meant as disrespect to the American players or to the American youth development, but if an American big man sets a screen, it's not really a screen. It's just forcing the defender to take a decision. Do I go over? Do I go under? Or is it already too late, or is the player blitzed already? So what with Guillermo and his brother Jorge as well is they set hard screens, you know, despite him not being smart enough, that really getting separation to the ball handler. Whether he's popping to the 3-point line to shoot, or he's rolling to the rim, or he's setting an off ball screen for another playing motion, you know. So I like his screening, that's the number one. The shot is work in progress because he didn't really shoot that well in his first season because he didn't really get a lot of usage on the Pittsburgh team, but that's okay. The flashes were enough to me because I like his shot. It's high arcing, and together with his size, I think it's going to translate well, especially as he works on it to improve it in year two. But at the end, I think he's tougher than he looks. I
Mhm.
think he's a decent rim protector, not a good rim protector. I think rim protection is not going to be his biggest trait at the NBA level. Because if you ask me, you have to either be a very good rim protector or you have to space the floor that good that you open the whole team up for you. And I think that's the second thing that's going to be in the NBA level. That's going to be his thing.
And he's a terrific offensive rebounder.
Yeah,
And
man.
and
Timing.
both of them can take care of the ball. Both of them, as freshmen, 1.2 assist to turnover ratio for Jorge and 1.15 for Guillermo. So they're guys that are going to come in, take care of the ball. You don't have to worry about kind of losing possessions by putting the ball in their hands because it's not really what their primary job is. Like you said, they're just going to make the smart basketball plays, and
Yeah, man.
that's what they've
They're
been.
very versatile, you know,
Yeah.
with what the team can do. And I like that you spoke on about the passing, you know, because I think he has the potential to be a great passer. Right now, I have him as a good passer because I think I'm in between, man. The reads that he's making are top notch, but executing them is what he's struggling with. And some passes, I don't think it's more of a bailout, you know, because he had certain plays last season where, for example, if he hits the cutter right away, it's 100% a good look. But he was a bit too late with his executions. I think that's the biggest thing for him to work on. But that comes with playing time, you know, and you can't blame him with the small role that he had last season. But Diaz Graham is a bit of wishful thinking because I'm really high on him. If everything clicks, he's going to be that man for me, most improved player without a doubt. I think he's going to be in first round considerations as well because what you can do at the five position, combined with size, combined with fundamentals, is going to be very important to NBA franchise. That's why, despite him not being very talked about so far, of course the fame is a little bit is improving for him. I'm happy for him that it's happening because it should have been years ago. But right now, in his sophomore season, he's going to have all eyes on him, and I'm happy for him, because I'm high on him. I discovered him last season in college basketball. And right now, this season, I'm invested in the Pittsburgh team just for him, man.
Yeah, I agree. I'm invested in this Pittsburgh team for both these guys. And we can keep the conversation in Spain. Um, got a guy from Mallorca, Baba Miller. What how are you feeling about Baba? I list him as
Yeah,
my second team just because I want to make sure we got a conversation about him. I tend to veer away from like I tend to veer away from the consensus stuff on these because I normally assume that the guest and Julian is gonna bring up the more heavy names, and I just try to throw a name in there so I make sure I don't forget. But Baba Miller was a name I wasn't gonna forget regardless because I just think if he brings it all together, man, we're looking at a top 10 pick for a lot of people, like, and me included. I mean, I was holding on to him in the top 10 of my board for the longest time, even when he wasn't playing. Ersin. I believe that strongly in the frame, just the raw intangibles. And I think the small stuff that he was still able to do last year coming into the season in the middle of the season, he was still displayed some major ability to pass the ball. His jumper looks great. I mean, the arc on that shot's awesome. It just needs to be more consistent. And I think he's going to be able to attack the basket with NBA spacing. And I think he's going to be able to do it consistently. He's going to be a transition threat. And then on the defensive end, I think he's great. I think his upside on the defensive end might be just as high as his upside on the offensive end if he can bring it all together. What are your thoughts on Baba Miller? And maybe you could tamper some of my maybe a little bit overshooting expectations, but I still think he has exceptional upside as a player.
Yeah, I agree, man. But to be honest, last season was a bit of a mess because of the suspension, and he came into a very bad Florida State team. It was all about Cleveland, you know. It was all about him, and that team wasn't really a team, if you ask me, last season. But with Baba Miller, I get the idea why people like him. I liked him a lot as well. I had him top 10 preseason, but after I saw him play, I was like, okay, he's not the guy for this season by far. I want to keep taking his name out, not because I don't like him, but he was not going to be one and done because of the suspension that really messed up his whole first season. But if you talk about the tools, it was the same thing when he was in Real Madrid's youth team. It was the same thing there. But I think Florida State they brought him in, but I don't think they really had a plan for him after the suspension, and I think that's costing him. But this summer, I think he had a decent summer, not a good summer. He showed a lot of flashes last season, especially as a defender, to guard his space, to guard switches effectively. I think that's going to be his role, at the next level. I think if he takes care of the defense, the offense will come. But he's very raw, man. I think he's a lot more raw than people give him. I think he really has to get accustomed to college basketball because he didn't play enough, and it's going to be his second season. And that's not a knock on him, but it's a knock on the NCAA because of the ridiculous suspension that he got.
Yeah.
I think he's raw, but as a defender, I see a good future for him at the NBA level. I think defense is going to be his calling card. Of course, the idea of a 6'10", 6'11" ball handler that runs pick and roll, that runs an inverted pick and roll, that makes plays for others, makes plays for himself. Of course, that's what everyone's wanting. But I think it's too early for him. It wouldn't even shock me if he stays for the junior, because he's still very young. I think he's still 19. But I have him as a potential lottery pick if everything clicks, man. If he stays for one more season and he has a good second year, it's all open for him, man, in 2025.
Yep.
And as for now, I keep my expectations a bit lower because I want to see what he does in the defense. That's going to be the biggest swing skill for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think the defense, like I said, is going to be the thing that is going to get him to the next level, especially if it's next year. Pivoting to some guys that are a little bit more put together as players. Let's talk about Virginia for a bit because I think they have an interesting collection of talent. And I put them as one of my two sleepers. And believe it or not, you were higher on Ryan Dunn than I am. I thought this was a sleeper prospect, but clearly the cat's out of the bag. What are you loving about Ryan Dunn's game? And then, I mean, I'll probably just reiterate the sentiments.
I liked them last season, man, because Virginia, people don't know it, but Virginia is one of my favorite teams in college basketball because how good they're defending, man. I think scoring 80 points against them is almost impossible. And that's because they are a good system. They are built to, defend first. They're not really a scoring team. So, but the danger is that some players are being inflated in terms of how good they are defensively. But with Dunn, I think last season he showed a lot of flashes, man, because he's making winning plays on defense. It doesn't really matter who he has to guard. I think if what teams did against them, they run a lot of switches because they what's his name, the guy that left school with Virginia, with that last second bonehead play, no? What's his name again, man? But I forgot about his name, but he plays next to Beekman. I think Beekman's coming up next, but with Dunn, I like his defense, man. And he wasn't really put in a position there where he was shown how good he was offensively because that whole Virginia team wasn't really built around, one certain guy taking over. Beekman tried it, but Beekman was especially number two on that team. And Dunn grew into his role furthermore in the season. I think their limited focus on the offensive end put a little cap on him last season. I think he was a guy that maybe should have gone last season. I think a team would have picked him up. But right now he has the potential to be a first round pick. That's how I see him because he's such a good defender that if you keep him 1 or 2 years in the NBA and the offense will come, he's going to be a very good rotational player at the next level. That's what I see for him, man. But I like him. I like him as a defender. I think the defense is real. Keep it that way.
Yeah.
He's a good team defender, but the individual defender is very impressive, man.
Yeah.
What he's brought to the table.
I couldn't agree more. I think that he matches that archetype of the things that I really loved about Trey Murphy. Maybe not the shooting quite as much. Obviously, Trey was, in my opinion, a generational shooting prospect. And I think he'll remain to be that for the rest of his NBA career. God bless, and I hope that he recovers fully and takes his career to the next step, just like a lot of people hope he can. But Ryan Dunn's another guy for Virginia that I'm loving what they're able to give the NBA in terms of large wings. And another guy that I think you spoke perfectly about Beekman. I think he'll have another great year and now that the show's kind of his, I think he'll have a chance to flourish and he'll be a long-time pro. For sure, no doubt about it. Andrew Rohde is a name that I've drilled on this podcast. I mean, I've drilled it on Twitter. I've drilled it on this podcast, like I said. And, a lot of people may have thought I was crazy at the beginning of the year for talking about this kid so much out of St. Thomas, Brookfield, Wisconsin. Okay, whatever, Caleb, like, cool, like, he's good. I said he's going to the ACC or the Big East. He's going to Creighton or he's going to Virginia. I said it in like January, and he ended up in Virginia. And I couldn't be happier for him because I think the biggest thing that this 6'6", 6'7" shooting, playmaking, does just a bit of everything on offense. The only thing he needs to do is shore up the defense, and he could not have picked a better school. And I think this kid is so smart that he knew exactly what he needed to do to get his stock to rise and to get his stock to rise quickly. I think we are going to be I'm not, but I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised when Andrew Rohde's playing as many minutes as he is. They're going to be like, who's this kid? What? Whoa, that's a good shot. Whoa, that was a really good read. Oh my God, he just clamped up that dude on the wing. And I guarantee you 2 weeks in, people are going to be talking about his length, his positional size, and he's going to be a guy that's, people are talking about maybe not this year, but next year is going to be a draftable prospect. I think he couldn't have made a better decision with his school choice. I don't know if you watched much St. Thomas last year or dug into much Rohde film, but great player. I'm excited about seeing him in a bigger stage. Playing against competition that more suits his skill set and where he's at in his development. What are your thoughts about Virginia as a whole? Maybe a little bit of Rohde if you watched.
Nah, especially with Rohde, I didn't see a lot of him, but I know you were talking a lot about him. And your next get, KJ, shout out to him. He was raving about him last season, I think, for a full year. So I trust his eye as well. I think he chose a good decision. It's a win-win. Virginia needs offense. He was, in terms of production, one of the better players last season. And in terms of
best
level,
freshman in the country.
it's a D1 level, So of course, some schools are at the lesser level, but that's okay. It's not a bad thing. I think he's scaling up his game and going to Virginia is one of the best teams in the ACC, without a doubt. And he has a certain task to improve that offense, So, but in terms of the draftable prospect, I have to see more. Man. I'm not really sure.
No, I totally understand, and I'm always going to be higher than the consensus on this kid. I saw him shoot the cover off the ball in high school, and I can't not be a believer after I see somebody shoot like 50% from three for a whole season for like 2 straight years. DJ Horn for NC State. Rohde was my top transfer. Horn is your top transfer into NC State. We can stick on NC State because there's a guy that I put in my second team that I think deserves major props. But what are you liking about Horn's game, and what's getting you excited about him coming into NC State?
I liked Arizona State last season. Man. I like him. I like Jamia Neal. I like the Cambridge brothers as well. The Cambridge brothers are pros in Europe now. But Horn is going to take care of the offensive scoring load because NC State is a backcourt-minded team. I think Horn is one of the best scorers in college basketball, and that's not overreacting. I think what's what's the disadvantage is that he's a 6 foot guard, and of course in college basketball, guard play matters, and that's his advantage. Yeah. I don't think he's an NBA prospect by any means, but he's going to be a very good college basketball player in his last season in college basketball. I think he's using his 5th year eligibility now. I like him, man. He's just a gifted scorer. He's going to be a terrific pro. And I'm very sure that already pro teams are considering him to sign him after his season at NC State. And I'm not sure where he started his career in the first 2 years, but he took a step up to Arizona State, and now he's playing for NC State. He's I like him because he's a pure scorer, man. I think his defense is not something that I like. I don't think he's a good defender, but his scoring is so good it doesn't really matter, man. I think he's going to be a 17, 80 point per game scorer if he gets the usage, which path to the usage is open for.
I think we'll talk about the guy who's probably going to pick up a lot of that usage that we saw from Joyner and Smith leave last year, and was the most. I mean, I loved Turk Smith. I I honestly liked him more 2 years ago than I did last year as a prospect, but Casey Marcel is just a lights out competitor, does everything right, hyper efficient, just what you love to see out of an off guard in college basketball. And I think they're so lucky to have gotten him back. And I think with the team that they have surrounding them, like you said, Horn and Marcel, I think as a backcourt, they're going to put up the scoring output. And I think like bringing in, MJ Rice, bringing in Dennis Parker Jr., bringing in Diarra, having DJ Burns returning, they're going to have a nice little core. And I think that they'll have a nice little 7-man to 8-man rotation, and they'll be competitive in this conference. I think people saw Turk Smith leave and all right, cool. We don't have to worry about NC State anymore. No. It's not that easy.
Yeah. I like Rice as well.
I think that they have a great team. And I think Marcel, for me, is going to be the swing, whether this is a team that can legitimately contend with the Dukes in North Carolina, or they're going to be in that next tier. But what are your thoughts on Marcel? I think he's just awesome.
Yeah, I think last season I was really focusing on him. It was more about what is Dirk Smith doing as a playmaker. But what I saw is that I think there's going to be the same thing. Backcourt is going to lead it. Backcourt is going to score 35 points, the two starters. If he's going to play next to Horn, I think he can do that. But right now it's too early for me to tell.
No, I totally get it. I just think that, he can play the 2, he can play the 3. I think that he adds major positional depth to their backcourt. And he was a player that I was really happy that was able to make a return for a 5th year in college basketball. And I'm wishing him the best. And speaking of some guys that are a little bit on the older end of the spectrum, I want to make a trip over to Clemson. Because you got PJ Hall, and I mean, I'll talk about Joe Girard, but PJ Hall looked great. I mean, in the offseason with some of his stuff they did towards the draft. I mean, everybody was talking about Hunter Tyson, but PJ Hall had himself some major games in some of those combine games. He looked great. He looked like an NBA player.
I think he's going to be an NBA player. I think he's going to be a top 40 pick. Right now, I think if everything clicks and Clemson made it into the tournament, he's going to be in contention for that All-American 30. That's what I think. I think in terms of his usage, Tyson is gone. The team's already his. He was close to 40% last season. He didn't really shoot that much. I think 2 or 3 threes a game. And Clemson relied on that 3-point, What I like about him is he can play as a 3, 4, as a 5 as well. I think he's strong enough to play as a college 5. And in today's NBA, having a guy like him on the bench, it's going to be a great thing. I think Clemson is a bit of a sleeper team to me in the ACC. I think they're the 3rd best team. I think they're better than Miami, to be honest.
I love it. I love Joe Girard. I think that this is a sneaky steal from Syracuse, where Syracuse is loading up on some of these more dynamic scorers and playmakers in their backcourt. Joe Girard is just a bucket, period. He's a leader. a guy that you want to have as your point guard on a college basketball team. I mean, I really think that when you draw up really what a prototypical score-ish first point guard is in college basketball, I don't think it's far off from Joe Girard the third. And I'm sure you'll agree with me. His 3-point shot's just incredible. His ability to create offense
Yeah,
for
I think
himself.
Syracuse was not a good team, man. It wasn't really what was he going to do? And now with Clemson, I think he's going to play the three perfectly. And especially with PJ Hall, I think if PJ Hall is going to be a number one 3-point shooter, right, it's not going to work for him. So Clemson did a good job in the portal, surrounding Paul with talent. And I like it, man. And you can pin it as well. I think he's going to be in contention for the All American spot, PJ Hall. And I had him as if Kyle Filipowski wasn't there, I had him as the ACC player of the year.
Wow. I love it. I love it. I love Hall's game. He's definitely going to be on that top 300 watch list and definitely towards the top 100. Maybe creeping his way up a little bit more. Some other guys that I kind of had as sleepers, a team that I just kind of briefly mentioned that that Clemson stole from Joe Girard. Syracuse, I think that if things swing right for them, they could be a really scary team just because of their backcourt. Obviously, the marquee name is Judah Mintz, and then J.J. Starlin coming off maybe a disappointing year in a lot of people's eyes at Syracuse or at Notre Dame. Now as Syracuse kind of forms, I think an ideal backcourt for both their skill sets, where Mintz is going to want to score the ball a little bit more, and Starlin's going to want to play defense and kind of push the tempo and play make a little bit. Both of them are more than capable playmakers. I love Judah Mintz. I was really high on him last year. I thought that he could have declared and been a guy that got his name called, especially if he put together some good performances. The things that I love about him is just his ability to take people off the dribble is unreal. I think he's what a lot of people just define as a hooper. What are your thoughts on Judah Mintz? I think he's got counters on counters. He's got a bag. I think if he can add to the playmaking stuff and drive to pass more often, it's only going to elevate his level as a draft prospect.
I think if we win last season, it was going to be in the first round contention without a doubt. Syracuse was not a good team for him because he had to lead that team, and I think leading the team wasn't really his biggest strength. I think he has to showcase that he is a better scorer, and right now, in year two, that's going to be his role because they brought the guy next to him, that he needs. And what I like about Mintz is that he's a very good playmaker. But in terms of, if you look at the metrics, it doesn't pop out because at Syracuse, he had to do too much. And I think Syracuse as a whole was not a good team for a prospect to develop. I think Syracuse was more of that old nostalgic blue blood. I still call him a blue blood, but for Mintz, of course, he has that attitude because you need an attitude like that to play at a school like Syracuse as a leader. But right now, I think if you look at the last 2 years, I think Syracuse was not really a team to keep an eye on. At least I didn't. Just for Mintz, I did last season a bit, but this season that backcourt is one of the best in the ACC without a doubt. And I think Mintz is going to play himself in the first round. Because talent-wise, he's there, but he has to showcase NBA franchises that he can do less to ball with less ball touches, Because last season the ball sticked in his hands, and I think a player like that is not going to succeed in the NBA, no matter how well he does, in terms of production. I think Sharif Cooper is one of the examples why it's dangerous to draft a high usage player like that with Dow's.
Christopher.
One of them as well.
And I think, Julian hates that I'm going to talk about this guy, but not a lot of people liked him, but I thought Naheem McLeod in limited minutes is going to provide a good baseline of front court play for them. They got Benny Williams back. They had Chris Bell, Chance Weststreet getting him from Auburn. You definitely saw that I had him listed as the second team before I put Marcel, but I think it just speaks to, maybe I don't think Weststreet's going to have the output, and that's probably why I took him off and put Marcel on, because I think he'll be a 15 to 18 point per game scorer. But Chance Weststreet does everything on the basketball court that I love. Rebounds, play makes, pushes the ball up the floor. can handle it a little bit. Not somebody that's the ball's going to stick in their hands where, you're going to have two ball dominant guards. I think having guys like Westry, having guys like Bell, having guys like Williams, having guys like McLuhan to surround these guys. It's why I have them as my sleeper team and as a dark horse in this conference. Because like you said, I think they have one of the most talented, not best in college basketball. I think, RJ Davis and Cadeau are probably going to take that title. Roach and Proctor, are definitely going to make a run for it. But in terms of pure talent, I don't think he gets better than these two guys. They are going to have every opportunity to turn themselves into marquee names for this draft or even next year. For Starling, I think, and Mintz for this year.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I love what Syracuse was able to do, and I think it for a new era for them, with a new head coach. I just think that this is the type of team that you look at and say, if everything goes right, perfect storm, this could be a team that contends. I've been talking about my dark horses. Let's talk about yours. You listed Wake Forest. You also had Steve Forbes as the coach of the year in the conference. What about Wake Forest has got you excited? Because I understand it. I think that they have a lot of great players. A guy that I really love is Matthew Marsh, high efficiency player, makes all the right plays. Kind of like a lot of guys that we've been talking about in this conference. Cameron Hildreth's a great player. Andrew Carr's a great player. I'm sure you're going to highlight the two Gonzaga transfers.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest reasons, because I think Coach Forbes is his fifth year, I think, at Wake Forest, and he already had several players going to the NBA, not directly, but Wake Forest is a team to respect, because last season they had a lot of pieces, but he wasn't really able to put it together. They
I
missed
didn't think
that
they had the top end
missing
talent.
click.
I didn't think they
Yeah.
had the top end talent to compete, and now they have
Exactly.
two guys that are
They
top
had
end
good
talent.
players, and now they have on the Sellers, who's a 5-star recruit who wasn't even playing for 2 years. I'm hiring him for 2 years. For me, it's a bit of a wishful thinking, but I still think he's a draftable guy for this next cycle. They get in Efton Reed, and they have in Hildred, as you said, but I like Domani Monsanto as well, man. I think he's one of the best shooters in college basketball. They have 7 or 8 players that if you put a structure around them, they're going to be good. I think Honda Sellers is going to be a starter for them. I think as a defender, he's going to give them what they didn't have. And I like Carr, but I think Carr is a bit limited defensively. But with Honda Sellers, I think if you put him in the spots that he needs, he doesn't have to be the number one baller on that team. But with his defense, he's going to lift that team up to maybe a top 5, top 6 team in the ACC. I think it's too loaded at the top. Clemson, Miami, Duke, North Carolina, of course. It's tough for them to compete with them, but in the tier below with NC State, with teams like that, with Syracuse, they can compete with them and maybe make it to the NCAA tournament. It's going to be a tough challenge. I think they were fifth, at 500 in the ACC record last season. I think they're going to be a winning team this season, and it's slowly progressing, So, but Coach Forbes, I think he's going to be my coach of the year, because if they make it to the top 5 in the ACC, he has to get it, man, because these other teams are just too loaded and just
That's why I
purely
love that pick.
roster wise.
It makes a lot of sense, and why I love that pick and wanted to make sure I mentioned it. Let's kind of dig here at the bottom of the ACC. I think there's a lot of guys that, I'll kind of skim over the two guys for Virginia Tech that I think are just great upperclassmen, Sean Padula, and then getting, Tyler Nickel, the sophomore, transferring from North Carolina to Virginia Tech to hopefully get himself a bigger role. Both players, I think, are going to have great years for Virginia Tech. It's a reset year. They lost a lot of talent. But more specifically, what are we loving about Miami this year? I listed Nigel Pack. I think he's just flat out one of the best shooters in college basketball. But you had Matt Cleveland. I don't know if I could get on the train with this one. I think I'm 2 years too long on Matt Cleveland's development. But what are you believing in his game? As we wrap it up here, we can kind of bounce around with some of these guys.
Yeah, when it comes to Cleveland, man, I think he's one of the best inside scorers in college basketball. The lack of a 3-point shot is what keeping him back. Of course, it's a bit of a lazy answer, but last year it was for me the same thing. 2 years ago it started. I think Cleveland, I think in terms of the handles, I like his handles a lot. That's the most important thing to me. I think he's a very, very capable ball handler. If the handle improves a little bit more, I think he can be trusted by NBA teams to handle the ball at the NBA level as well. Because he's in a very tough situation. Because in today's NBA, if he was playing 15 years ago, he would already be in the league, without a doubt. But with shooting being so important and with shooting being one of his main areas of development, it's best for him to go to a team that's already stacked with shooters. Nigel Peck is a very good shooter. They had Luka Poplar as well, right? I think these
Great
two
shooter.
guys are going to shoot the lights out for them. But Matthew Cleveland is going to bring them what they didn't really have last season. If you take Omir out, inside scoring. I think Matthew Cleveland is one of the best players with the total package, especially off ball. He's a very good cutter, an active cutter. I think he doesn't really need the ball in his hands that much. But at Florida State, it was his team. He could do whatever he wanted. But I think with handle being such a getting more red to find a good ball handler. I think the NBA, not to compare them, but just to give an example, the NBA won't get a guy like Kyrie anymore. He was the best ball handler to me in the NBA, without a doubt. But with Matthew Cleveland, I like his handles a lot, man. I like his scoring. As a defender, he has some things to clean up, but at Miami, he has to
Has the
clean up
potential
because they're
for sure.
contending.
Has the potential to be a great defender for sure. I think that's what a lot of people have been kind of hanging their hat on and haven't really gotten the returns. Julian would hate me if I didn't give no Chad O'Meara's props. Just one of the most stable pieces in this entire conference. I'm just going to kind of run through a lot of the other names I wanted to get to. I thought Louisville brought in some great talent this year. I think their year is next year that
Yeah,
we'll
man.
definitely talk
Dennis
about
Evans.
a lot. Dennis Evans is great. Huge, huge big man for them. Supreme athlete. I think he's going to do awesome. Rim presence is just awesome. I am also loving, I got to give a shout out to Quinn and Post, the only 50, 40, and 80 player in Division One basketball last year for Boston College. And I'm going to wrap it up talking about Miles Kelly, who I listed on my first team. Going to be a guy that I really, really hang my hat on as one of the best guards in this conference and one of the best guards in college
Yeah,
basketball.
facts, man. I love the pick.
Yeah, yeah. I love Miles Kelly. I think he'll be great. I'm looking forward to seeing the shooting improvements, looking forward to seeing the playmaking improvements. I know you got to get going, Ersin, and I appreciate your time. Any closing notes on the ACC before I let you get out of here?
Man, the ACC is one of my favorite conferences by far
We could have spent
because what
2 hours.
what I like about is just I think in terms of fundamental basketball, I think that's what the ACC brings. Virginia is so defensively minded. Wake Forest has a rich history between North Carolina and Duke, which is one of the hardest things to do with how they're located. I think in terms of the coaches, the ACC is one of the best conferences. They don't get the love for it. With Steve Forbesby is one of my favorite coaches in college basketball. It's him and Musselman. Those are my top two coaches. And this year they took in a lot of transfer talent, not so much freshman talent. That's why I think the ACC is going to be stronger than last year, than 2 years ago as well. And they have Miami who's going to contend, Duke's going to contend, Clemson is going to contend for the NCAA tournament and maybe make it to the first weekend. I'm not really sure about what's going to happen to North Carolina, but they're in there every year, so it's going to be one of my favorite conferences to follow.
Yep. I
By
couldn't
far.
agree more. I couldn't agree more. Like I said, we could have used several hours on it. I hope that you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week, and we are off the clock.